welcome to Broken Entertainment. So I've been talking on this channel for some time now about what I call fake diversity, which is the need by film studios and other creators to kind of mark off these check boxes. Oh, here's our gay character, here's our woman character, here's our black character. And none of those characters have any personality or feeling. They're just identified by something surface level. And it's not that those things, those identifiers, can't be very important to somebody, but with people, they're never the whole sum of their identification, right? And I forget which video I was watching recently, but they said, name 2 personality traits of Rey from Force Awakens or any of the other Disney Star Wars movies. And you can't. I couldn't. And when you think about it, all they push about her is she's super strong and powerful and she doesn't need men and she's a woman. And there's a lot of that in Hollywood. And there's a lot of that in our entertainment in general. And here we have an article. There's actually 2 articles we're going to go over. The first one is an interview with Katee Sackhoff. And in this interview, she talks about this scene at the end of The Mandalorian Season 2 where all the female characters are doing something on a mission. They're fighting bad guys. And she points out the reason it worked is because they didn't have a moment where they stop and they go, look, it's all women. And she makes some points in this article that we'll get to that kind of miss the mark. But she says something else that's very spot on, and it ties into this other article. So let's go ahead. Katee Sackhoff attempts to explain why the all-female scene in The Mandalorian works. And this is from Bounding into Comics. In the lengthy interview with Looper, where she discusses her YouTube channel as well as Battlestar Galactica, Sackhoff is asked, when you were cast on Battlestar, there was a pretty vocal group of fans that was pissed about Starbuck being a woman. That seemed to change once the show came out, but looking at the season finale of Mandalorian, and it's you and Mercedes and Gina and Ming-Na Wen driving almost all the action, and people almost didn't notice. As a sci-fi action star, have you seen the attitude towards women in that space change? And here we get some editorializing from Bounding into Comics. First off, this question is laughable. Din Djarin actually has 2 huge fight sequences in the final episode. First against Dark Trooper and the second against Moff Gideon. Not to mention the final combat sequence is Luke Skywalker going ham on the Dark Troopers, but the all-female fire squad was driving almost all the action. Nevertheless, Sackhoff responded, absolutely yeah. Well, first and foremost, one of the reasons Starbuck worked was we never mentioned the fact she was a woman. She was a well-rounded, interesting, creative character in a world that was fun to watch. She just happened to be a woman. Bingo, stop, don't go any further with the interview. That's it. That's the thing. That is what real diversity looks like. That is what I have been trying to get across that to these people on Hollywood's side is, look, it's not that nobody wants women in the movies. It's not that there's anything wrong with a female action star. There's nothing wrong with a gay character. There's nothing wrong with a black character who is an action star or what have you. That's not the problem people have. The problem is it has gone from what it was for years, where these characters existed, but these weren't their defining features. Okay? You could point to Sigourney Weaver and Alien, but you can go farther back than that. And after, I think it was after Sigourney Weaver, you have Sarah Connor. But before then, you have strong female characters in movies dating all the way back. But the modern media, the modern entertainment industry ignores these things because if they admit it, their whole agenda falls apart. And you have these characters that existed then that they're ignoring, and now when they have a character, they spend so much time telling you that character is a woman or whatever. And they forget the rest of the narrative. They forget to make the character interesting. They don't give them personality. They don't give them anything because, one, especially in the case of female characters, if it's a woman, you can't put her through true adversity. You can't have her losing to a man, and you can't have her be the villain. So they drop any pretense of making art or characters that are interesting, and what you get is dull, bland cardboard cutouts of specific identities. And what Katee Sackhoff points out is when she was first cast as Starbuck, yeah, a lot of people rolled their eyes. But that's because they're thinking, oh great, we're going to get a bunch of gender swapped and race swapped characters, and they're going to just constantly shove down her throats. But then when the show came out and you watched it, you're like, wow. You like totally forgot the whole thing. Because Starbuck was so well written, it just didn't matter. And they didn't spend time shoving it down your throat. They just gave you this awesome character and made you go, oh wow, look at this writing. That's why people love this show. Its writing was so good. Its characters were so good that nobody stopped at any point and thought, oh God, this is so annoying. Because it wasn't. Starbuck was a character. Starbuck was a fighter pilot. Starbuck had emotional problems. Starbuck had damage. Oh yeah, and she was a woman. But now it would be Starbucks woman, Starbucks woman, Starbucks woman, Starbucks woman, Starbucks woman, Starbucks woman, and then they'd forget the rest of it. And they'd have to tell you over and over and over again. I mean, how many times in the new Doctor Who do you hear, I'm a woman now? You know, you have this whole scene in one of the recent-ish episodes where the Doctor walks in somewhere and they're like, oh, I thought you were a man. And she's like, oh, I got an upgrade. You know, first of all, screw off. Second of all, that's not what makes the Doctor interesting. The Doctor's gender never really was his identity in that sense. And Starbuck's identity was Starbuck, not a woman. Starbuck happened to be a woman, and that can play into the development of a character and into the personality of a character, certainly, but it is not their only trait. And with modern entertainment reducing people down to these stupid surface level things is a complete disservice to everyone, including the people they say they're representing. Because do you want, if you're a woman, okay, do you want people to remember female characters in movies and entertainment simply that they're a female? Like, is that all you want them to know? If you're gay, is that all you want? Like, people who are gay have a lot more going on in their lives than just that. And a lot more identification to them than their sexuality. Humans are complex, difficult creatures. And we have a lot of identifiers, and none of us are identified by one thing. Or two things. It's impossible to narrow somebody down to that and still have a believable and interesting character. If you look back on all the interesting characters in any of our entertainment, they're not interesting because of one thing. So, you know, we have these characters and they're all complicated and interesting, and now in the last, let's call it 10 years, but probably less than that. Let's say 10 to 6 years. We've gone the other direction. All these characters are being stripped of the interesting qualities and reduced cardboard cutouts with an identity written on the front. So let's go a little bit more into the article. Sackhoff would then transition to The Mandalorian. The reason why that scene at the end of The Mandalorian worked was they didn't talk about the fact they were women. They were just the best people for the job, and they were there. They did it, and they succeeded. Exactly. We didn't stop to be like, female power, woohoo! You take the lead because you're the prettiest. You know what I mean? This was just the crew that was available. Exactly. I mean, I don't know how else to put it other than she's spot on. It worked because the characters were allowed to be characters. The situation was allowed to be what it was. And there was no stopping and priming and posing. There was no, look at us, look at these strong women, look how diverse we are. You know, at some point, it just gets to be ridiculous with a lot of these entertainment problems. Movies, TV shows, what have you. Where you're just like, stop and just let the character be a character. My God. You know, there's these really awkward moments in Wonder Woman 84 and in the Justice League movie, both versions, where Wonder Woman stops what she's doing. And she turns to a girl. And she has this moment where she's like, you can be anything you want. And it's like, why are you being so weird? Of course they can. And the way Wonder Woman used to show that was by simply being Wonder Woman. You know, she was a role model for women and girls because they saw her being awesome, and that was enough. They didn't need her to stop and look at the camera and go, you can do anything you want. Well, I mean, that was kind of the point, right? They already knew that because here she was doing it. And then they go on to editorialize some more, which I'm not interested in that aspect of this particular article. It is a little contrived is what they're getting at, basically, that, you know, the reason there are no men available is because they send them off to do other things. And those are important things, though. So, you know, there's much more egregious examples of that being done. So she continues to answer the question, turning to how the industry has changed. I think that's what's changed, not only the genre, but in our industry, is we don't feel like we have to quantify a female's existence anymore by saying, well, she's a woman, she's a strong female character. We don't have to do that anymore. This is where Katee gets it wrong. You never had to. No one in the 80s stopped to say, Sarah Connor is a strong female character. They just said Sarah Connor is awesome. Okay? You never had to do that. That came into our entertainment in the last 6 to 10 years, where they'd have like these awkward moments in Wonder Woman 84 and the Justice League, and where you have the ridiculous scene in Captain Marvel of Captain Marvel kicking everyone's ass, and they play a ridiculously on-point song about being just a girl. I mean, good Lord. You don't have to do that. You never had to do that. There's a Western from, I want to say the 70s. I'm not sure because I could never catch the name of the Western, and I didn't watch most of it. I just caught a clip of it. But at the end of the movie, this strong male character who has been awesome because he's a good character, he gets saved at the end of the movie, and he gets saved by his wife, who shoots someone. That's the 70s. You can go farther back, but that's not really the point. The point is, they want you to not know about all of that because they want to focus on this agenda. And the problem has become we've gone from interesting characters who are strong as characters and powerful as characters who happen to be women to this is a woman ignore everything else. We're not going to give her a personality or interesting characteristics, and we're certainly not going to give her anything negative. And then reducing all the male characters to sidekicks, idiots, or villains. You know, this is new. And she says, now it's just like, it isn't that awesome to watch. Holy crap, that was amazing. That's not to take away from and negate the fact they're obviously women. I think that's what's changed the most in the industry. We have so many amazing women to watch. There are more female characters now than before. In terms of this kind of female character. Yes. But this is a false change because it didn't exist in the first. You never had to say, look at her. You never had to stop and say, strong female character, woohoo. Because they just existed. And they just existed as part, like Starbuck. Like the character Katee Sackhoff played. They just existed in a compelling narrative as compelling characters who were complex and human. That's why when you come to us and say, look, strong female character, Captain Marvel, woohoo, we just go, what are you talking about? What about this and this and this? And they're like, well, that never happened until, just recently. Well, no, I can point you back to the 70s and earlier, probably, without diving into the research. And she's not the only one to come out and say this. And she gets indirectly support from, Samara Armstrong in another article and another interview. This time with, she was on the OC and Resurrection. I'm not familiar with either one of those. But this was with PragerU. She points out, I think nowadays it's different for the sake of being different because it's politically correct. And here she nails it on the head. And it's exactly in line with what Katee Sackhoff is saying. Natural, organic stories stopped being told, and you had to make a checklist of what was acceptable. All the nuance of art disappeared. And she goes on, we aren't able to be authentic. We're not allowed to question or converse. We're literally forced to be silent. If you don't emulate what they expect of you, you are a racist and a bigot. You have privilege, so you'll never understand. We're talking about this authoritarian dictatorship of how things should operate, and we're existing within that, within Hollywood. It's like, these quotas need to be met, and that's the story. That's acceptable. We can't be canceled. And she goes on to talk some about her politics. Natural stories have disappeared. You tell a natural story and it sticks out now. Where you're like, oh wow, that character was so good. Why? It should be the norm. Battlestar Galactica's relaunch worked for a couple of different reasons. One of them was because they never said it was a remake. It was technically supposed to take place in an alternate universe. They said that. Creators said that. Two, because the gender identity of the characters didn't matter. The race identity of the characters didn't matter. The characters were so well written and so compelling, and the narrative so natural and organic that nothing mattered outside of the quality of the story. And that show had a lot of political subtext, but it was all subtext. And again, the writing was so good you just didn't care. Good writing has complicated, deep characters with a lot of flaws, because that's how people are. Nobody is perfect. And bad writing in our modern entertainment that stands out, like Captain Marvel, to pick on that example a little more, or Rey, in Star Wars is a character who has an identity, and that's it. There's nothing compelling about Rey. The big compelling thing about Rey from The Force Awakens was, where did she get all this power? Well, once it's answered, because she's a woman and some MacGuffin level crap. Once that's answered, she's not interesting. She just exists. Okay, it's like the characters in Godzilla vs. Kong, where they're written so flat you don't remember their names after the movie ends. You remember Godzilla and King Kong. And this is the problem. These two actresses have pointed out perfectly the problem with our modern entertainment. In their effort to push agenda, they have stripped away nuance. They have stripped away the natural story writing and arcs of characters. They have stripped away the art. And they have reduced it to a corporate board checking off check marks to make sure that they fit within this political narrative. Where they say, you are a woman. You're the woman character. You're the white man character. You're the black man character. You're the gay character. Well, what's my character's name? Well, that doesn't really matter. We'll figure it out later. When you reduce them to these cardboard cutouts, nothing matters. Nothing is compelling. When you cut away the art and the nuance, all you're left with is surface level garbage. And we've seen people turning away from surface level garbage in record numbers. Godzilla vs. Kong is the first movie in a year that has done well at the box office. And you can say, well, pandemic, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. It's the first movie since what? I mean, let's put Godzilla vs. Kong in the context of, forget the pandemic. Imagine how much more money it would be making. That wouldn't make it a worse film. It would be better. It would be making more money. If you put it in that context, you might be talking about $1 billion movie about Godzilla and King Kong. And the question is why? Well, it's not because it's a great movie. It's because it's the first movie in how long that has just been entertainment. There is nuance in Godzilla vs. Kong. There is character in Godzilla vs. Kong. It's not human, but it's there. It's on the smiling face of a giant lizard and the emotive face of King Kong, whose story everybody can relate to, of trying to find family and home, right? It's the first movie in how long? I mean, let's think about it. Let's go back. What came out before the pandemic? And what came out before the pandemic that did well? I can't think of the names off the top of my head. You can come up with Avengers Endgame. But Avengers Endgame was... If you release Avengers Endgame in a void, that movie fails. Because all the nuance, all the natural narrative, all the story is built up over a decade worth of movies to get to that point. There just aren't a lot of good examples anymore. And that's why I try to point out the good examples as much as I can. Because it's time to move away from that. It's time to say, Star Trek is dead. Star Wars is dead. And it's time to say, okay, fine. You can have it. I'm going to point out every time you do something stupid. I'm going to point out every time you piss me off. I'm going to point out every time you spout lies and political crap. But I'm going to move on. And it's time we all move on. Don't give them your money, and give somebody who deserves it your money. Go find the books, the movies, the TV shows, the entertainment that still speaks to you, and reward that. Find the indie creators who are pushing limits, who are pushing forward and saying, you know what, while our entertainment collapses around us, I'm going to make something. If you don't like Marvel and DC or Boom Studios or what have you, there are indie creators out there. Go find them. And that's why I'm trying to push them as much as I can. Because, as Katee Sackhoff and Samaria Armstrong have both pointed out now, they've stripped everything away. It's all about checklists. And you know who that hurts the most? The people they're checklisting. The only thing interesting about you is your identity. And that we're just going to give a surface level analysis of. So let me know what you think of what these two have said. Let me know what you think of our entertainment as a whole right now. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.